Good afternoon. You're listening to WVBN, the world's choice for weekly news. News from the League of Nations. The Zurich Conference concluded this week with an extensive set of resolutions adopted, the first unilateral agreement adopted by all great powers since the Morgana invasion. An extensive report will detail this resolution in the coming days, so stay tuned for more information. In addition to a set of resolutions, the League outlined guidelines that nations would adhere to. Representing this unified fleet would be the captain who won Skagerrak, chosen to lead an international coalition of ships possessing awoken bells. News from the North Sea. The Allies resumed their blockade of the North Sea, but were unable to prevent German raiders from escaping the blockade. German mercantile ships sailed to the Norwegian port of Narvik through neutral waters, an important point of contact with Swedish trade and Finland. News from Italy. The Regia Marina left port early to assist Spain with an ongoing Morgana siege. Through repeated Morgana attacks, they reached a small Spanish squadron of destroyers and gunboats, who joined them in a counterattack off the southern coast of Spain. The Spanish vessels sustained heavy damage and the loss of one vessel, but were able to force the Morganas to retreat into a nearby French raiding force. It has been reported that the French battleship Dunkirk was misidentified and nearly struck by a friendly torpedo, but avoided any collision. Though the Italian fleet had won the battle, they were immediately recalled back to the mainland to pursue a new group of Morganas in the Aegean Sea. News from Germany. While previous weeks had seen German high command at odds with the Kriegsmarine about their role against the Morganas, it has been reported this week that there were talks of sending a small number of vessels serving as a specialized task force under international banner, but ultimately declined due to fears of intelligence leaks. Back in Germany, officers and scientists were running undisclosed tests on their awakened bells. The cruiser Deutschland publicly volunteered to undertake these tests, but only commented that she was grateful to be of service. The island of Helgoland was evacuated of all civilians as work began on new constructions under the eye of a number of specialists. The Morgana Malice was seen observing, but in keeping with Kriegsmarine policy, was not pursued. News from the United States. The United States escorted the esteemed USS Constitution to Washington this week under heavy escort. While a modern fleet of battleships and cruisers was certainly an impressive deterrent, many claimed that it was Constitution's bell alone that kept away any would-be interlopers. A second fleet was sent to deal with the broadcasting seditions along the East Coast. The fleet met one reportedly called the Conductor, broadcasting army marches, who promptly scuttled herself without combat. Many weeks of security once again saw many Americans questioning the need for the Navy to operate far from home, as a lack of attacks on the coast and on merchant convoys was a peace not seen since before the war. News from the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom implemented price controls and labor reform under the Chamberlain government this week. The impact of Morganas on trade, as well as the failure of British intelligence to keep pace with German intelligence, saw further criticism levied against the Prime Minister. A destroyer flotilla was dispatched to deal with the Morgana corruption in the western approaches, reported to have been building something out of a captured vessel. Upon their return, the ships underwent chemical decontamination, while the government has refused further comment. Due to ongoing operations, a lone Morgana submarine was allowed to patrol near the town of Brighton without interruption. The armed merchant ship Rajputana was sunk by a Morgana, but 19 of whose crew were rescued by her sister and awakened belle, Rawalpindi, who raced to the scene. News from Japan. After their victory at Formosa, the Japanese Navy returned to their normal duties, beginning with the ferrying of additional troops to China for the army. Japanese carriers continued their campaign against the Morgana delusion and successfully won their air campaign against her, allowing a relative peace in the area. Off the Bonin Islands southeast of Japan, the Morgana fire reappeared after being chased off. News from the Soviet Union. The Baltic Fleet set out in force to finish off the Morgana starvation, who had been lingering in the area for weeks. After days of intense and brutal hunting, every last starvation had been sunk. Reports of Morgana constructions in Poland were theorized to be the source of recent weather anomalies. In the Pacific, the Soviet Navy dealt with a group of sedition that were broadcasting Japanese troop movements openly. What reason they had for shutting down what would otherwise be free intelligence is unknown, but in the aftermath several groups of Soviet and Japanese army units agreed on a loose collaboration to monitor the northern Pacific. News from France. A French fleet arrived in the Mediterranean Sea, smashing to pieces a Morgana fleet as they passed through Gibraltar. They continued to engage scattered Morgana vessels near Spain, capping off their efforts by annihilating a Morgana fleet fleeing the Italians and Spanish. A stray torpedo nearly hit the battleship Dunkirk, but missed its target. This cooperative effort strengthened French relationships with Italy and Spain, which further translated into support for the United Fleet. Nevertheless, Morganas were once again sighted off French territories and colonies elsewhere, a stark reminder of the limited capacity of the Marine Nationale. That's all for this week. Join us again at WVBN as we bring you the latest news from around the world. From all of us here at the studio, stay safe out there.